Brian here again, and I wanted to dedicate this email to all things Mothman, Mothman sightings and stories. I've not only heard accounts and stories from the Point Pleasant area, but also all over the southeastern section of the United States, even up in Pennsylvania and western New York. I've heard all sorts of horrible stories you wouldn't believe. Many of my most northern accounts are based out of Chicago, which many people have sightings there too, and you wouldn't believe that. I'll be sure to try my best and to share those stories with you. I'm pretty sure you'll enjoy them. The first story I'll share with you is from a married couple whom I spoke to personally. We'll call them Dawn and Stephanie, a married couple in their 40s. They were hiking around in the Wayne National Forest, which is actually just north of Point Pleasant. They said they began to feel uneasy when the wife spotted this dark figure with large wings flying above them, above the tree line. She said at one point it swooped down onto a branch and watched them. Then they came to some sort of large clearing, and this being or figure swooped down at them, scaring them, causing them to flee in horror and for their lives. They fled all the way back to their vehicle, where the thing apparently did not pursue the chase, but seemed intent on hurting them. Both the husband and wife described it as a large mass humanoid shape, with large tethered, tattered wings, kind of like that of a bat. They didn't see any features of the face. It was just like a large black silhouette, but had large red glowing eyes, kind of like bioluminescent orbs. Very, very creepy. They were pretty scarred from the experience, and even sought trauma therapy, in which most therapists actually did not believe them, which caused them to stop therapy altogether. And now, they just deal with their sighting and express it to others, hoping they can help. But there are many around this area in West Virginia that have their own sighting. Going slightly northwest of Point Pleasant is a small town known as Jackson. There is an older gentleman who lives outside of Jackson who had his own horrifying experience. He said he saw one of these things swoop down and grab his dog and carry it off in the trees. Says it happened the same way you would see a hawk swoop down and grab a salmon out of the river. It was just a quick blur of emotion. It grabbed his German shepherd, and off it went, his dog howling in pain and fright, and this thing was gone. He said it was too quick to be able to go grab his rifle and shoot at it. The man, very distressed during the interview I had with him, had to cut it short. He was visibly too shaken and too frightened. That's an encounter and interview that will always stick with me. That's how I know some of these people are not lying to me. They have nothing to gain from it, and when you're too shaken up to continue the interview and the story, something happened. You can't fake that kind of trauma. I asked him why he never bothered calling the police, and quite frankly, between not believing him and thinking there's nothing they could do, he told me why bother. Heading westward to a small town of Lucasville, just north of Portsmouth, a woman was driving on the main stretch of road at night when she said this Mothman figure dropped down about 30 yards directly in front of her car, making her slam on her brakes. She said to me over the phone that even though her brights were fully illuminating this thing, that it was still like a shadow. No details, just a solid figure of black with two glowing red eyes. But here is where the encounter gets terrifying. She said this thing, this demonic being, telepathically spoke to her, telling her it was going to kill her, her entire family, and torture her. In incredible fright, her fight-or-flight senses kicked in, and she swerved the car around as fast as she could, nearly flipping the car, and drove well over 60 miles in the opposite direction, heading south when she was supposed to be heading north. She booked in at a local motel and had a close family relative come and pick her up, saying she refused to drive that road anymore. Sadly, she passed away January of 2020. Going north a bit, northeast of Columbus, Ohio, is a town called Mount Vernon, where a man in his late 30s, on his morning drive to work, spotted a large black figure flying westward in the sky. Said it was incredibly fast and was far too large to be any bird that he's aware of. Said it looked almost human in shape, and was just that, like all the other sightings, a large black silhouette. Moving up north, heading west from Cleveland, you have a very small town called Oak Harbor, where an older man experienced complete and utter terror. Driving during the evening time along Highway 2, he spotted what appeared to be a large black bird of incredible size flying from the northeastern direction, heading southwest from Lake Erie towards him. He said, even though it was flying in that direction, it seemed to be heading directly at him. Frightened, he was already on his way home, but picked up the pace, and said it kept level with his car up in the sky and followed him around. He said once he got home, he was so frightened he did not even look up in the sky to see if it was still following him. He ran in his house, locked all of his doors, and a couple of hours later, he tells me he heard something of heavy proportion land on his roof with a heavy thud. The entire night, he could hear something heavy walking around on his roof on two legs. Thud, 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 is what he told me he could hear, back and forth, all along his roof. This happened till around 2 or 3 in the morning, when it suddenly stopped. He believes it was whatever this was chasing him. For whatever reason, he's not sure. His stance is it is the dreaded Mothman. A young woman in her early 20s described what she says is the Mothman. It stalked her and hunted her for years. She lived just north of Louisville, Kentucky. She says the first time she ever saw it was after a terrible thunder and lightning storm, and that it has followed her from Indiana all the way down to Kentucky, all throughout her life, popping in randomly just to make sure she knows her place, like it wants her to be suppressed, like it wants her to be terrified. She's expressed to me that every time she goes outside, she can't help but always feel like she has to look over her shoulder or check her surroundings thoroughly, feeling like the Mothman is always going to be there, observing her and watching her. It's almost like her demonic guardian, except the opposite of a guardian, more like an assailant. I'd asked her if she does any sort of religious activity to try and defend herself, like burn sage, talk to a priest, pray, and she firmly stands that she's an atheist and believes if she stands her ground and ignores it enough, it'll just go away on its own. At this point in my email, I want to kind of change the pace of things up. Let's go back down southeast to Charlotte in North Carolina. This is where sightings kind of change up a little bit. So Charlotte is actually pretty south of Point Pleasant. And while people still have sightings, frequent I might add, of what they describe as the Mothman, the descriptions change a little bit. It's not just a large black silhouette that resembles the typical Mothman you'd see all around Point Pleasant. The descriptions are a little bit more bat-like the wings, instead of just being a dark shadow, are more like large tattered bat wings, and the body is almost large and gargoyle-like, with a tail sometimes, and other times without a tail. But the head is still the same. It's still seen as a general dark figure, with 2 large glowing red eyes. All the attributes, all the behaviors still line up with all your typical Mothman sightings, which leads me to believe that this is either A, the same cryptid, just taking on a different form, or B, a brother-like cryptid to the Mothman, dare I say Batman, or would that just be too out of place and cheesy? I'll let you decide. A young couple in their 20s with a newborn baby described seeing a large bat-like black figure swoop down and steal all 12 of their chickens overnight. It was the most horrifying thing, the man had told me. He even tried shooting at it, but said the bullets didn't seem to do anything to it, and it was adamant about stealing every one of his chickens. The man is very heavily religious, has prayed, and hasn't seen it back since. His firm belief is that this Mothman figure is from hell, and it needs to be rid of through prayer and faith. And here's another really crazy one for you. A man and his brother broke down in a vehicle south of Lynchburg. which is pretty well north of Charlotte. Northeast, actually. Apparently, the younger brother declares that he was possessed by the Mothman, acting completely out of character, doing things and saying things that would almost resemble that of demonic possession. The younger brother claims that he was told to take his own life, and he's going to, quote-unquote, follow the orders of the demons. He then pulled out his gun and shot himself in front of his older brother. Whether it was a mental breakdown or not is a different story. The older brother, only being the older brother by about 4 years, claims he was very close with his younger brother, and his younger brother and entire family never showed signs of any schizophrenia or other mental illnesses. In fact, him and his brother had very good lives, good jobs and careers, great families, everything going for them, and out of the blue, he said his brother immediately began acting different, complete personality change, all in a 24-hour period while they were south of Lynchburg. And his younger brother, before committing suicide, kept claiming he was possessed by the Mothman. The older brother also explained to me that him, his younger brother, and their entire family weren't religious at all. They used to be Catholic when they were little, but since having a falling out with the church when they were little, his parents are agnostic, and they were atheistic and agnostic as well, so there's no reason this should have happened. His older brother is left perplexed, and is starting to believe, just maybe, the Mothman really did have something to do with it. Heading west outside of Richmond, Virginia, a 17-year-old girl was telepathically spoken to when she was visited by the Mothman in the middle of the night. Horrified and paralyzed, she was told that she would be welcomed in hell when she got into a fatal car accident 2 nights later. It turns out that her and her best friend had plans to go on a mini road trip south to Norfolk to visit some boys they had been talking to. Well, it turns out she actually didn't go on the trip, too afraid by her experience. Her friend ended up getting in a fatal car accident that same night, exactly like this demonic being had telepathically told her. That was over 10 years ago, and she firmly stands that it was indeed the Mothman that visited her and told her, and gave her this insight. She is now a medium and training to be a psychic. And finally, the last sighting I'll share with you today is from a gentleman who swears he saw the Mothman dive in from the sky, down deep into Lake Ontario. He was currently visiting his family in Oswego, which is on the north border of New York State. His family owns waterfront property, in which you have pretty clear view of the lake. He said they were looking out one morning, and they saw this long bat figure, totally black, fly directly down, right into the water and disappear, maybe no more than 100 yards out, completely visible in the daytime. Anybody else around probably saw it too. It terrified him, and believes too that it was indeed the Mothman, after having so many sightings of him and his friends throughout his life. Turns out, he actually came from around the Point Pleasant area himself, so he knew well what he was seeing. Perhaps this thing follows people around. Perhaps it was just a freak sighting. I guess we'll never know. Again, thank you for taking the time to read these to your audience, to make people more aware. If I could help inform and educate at least one person, it makes my job easier. We'll be in touch. I got tons more amazing stories for you, of all different varying cryptids. Take care.